Hi there everybody and welcome to Art of Procurement episode 264. I'm your host Philip Eidson. Now before I introduce you to today's guest, I want to let you know that I'm really excited to tell you that we have a new title sponsor for the next 3 months on Art of Procurement. So I first introduced a title sponsor for Art of Procurement back in 2016, and back at the beginning of this year, January 2019, we actually created a brand partnership program, which you'll have seen through some of the AOP live webinars that we've done, and we actually have a couple of special series lined up for later in the year. Now, the focus on all these is thought leadership, and so designing the program to be true to Art of Procurement, being authentic, is one of the reasons it's taken me almost 3 years between the original title sponsorship program we had and the new ways in which we work with companies who want to invest in helping us all in the procurement profession elevate the role of procurement. Now, one of those sponsorship opportunities is for partners to become our title sponsor. As you can probably imagine, producing the podcast is really expensive, both in terms of time and expenses. And so our title sponsor really helps offset some of those costs. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to today's sponsor, Tradov. I first connected with Kent Yan. Kent is the founder and CEO of Tradov. Almost 10 years ago, I was actually a practitioner at the time, and it was just a couple of months after he went live with version 1 of the platform. So while the Tradov platform has evolved since that version 1 back in 2010, their mission really remains the same. And that's to target and eliminate pain points for business buyers and sellers. So things like purchasing urgency, unaligned buying and selling processes, lack of communication and transparency, and difficulties discovering new suppliers. Now, one of the things you can do with Tradov is build your own private network or community portal. You can do that within the tool for free. So, for example, as a procurement organization, you can create a private network within Tradov where your entire procurement team can come together and share information, post thought leadership, start group discussions. So it's a little bit like a hybrid of LinkedIn, Slack, and a wiki page that brings together all of your team's communications into one place. While you're doing that, you can then switch over to the public areas of Tradov, and there you'll join a community of over 250,000 buyers and sellers. And as a buyer, you can post your supply needs, and Tradov will notify the best suited sellers worldwide. So that gives buyers an opportunity to find new suppliers, receive multiple proposals, and become better informed on the market dynamics of the product or service that you're buying. Now, finally, buyers and sellers then have the opportunity to transact via Tradov's B2B blockchain solution. It's a blockchain payment solution. Long-time listeners are going to know that we've explored the potential of blockchain as a disruptive technology on the Art of Procurement for the past couple of years, and I'm really excited to see Tradov bring a product to market that has the potential really to be transformative from a payments perspective. So to join Tradov, whether to create a private network for you and your team, or to discover new suppliers for your next sourcing event, just go to artofprocurement.com/Tradov. That's artofprocurement.com/Tradov, and that will take you to an Art of Procurement page on the Tradov website. Okay, so let me talk about the show today. I'm joined today by Dana Small. Dana is a global category manager at BioMarin and author of the Miscategory Management blog. It's rare to find a procurement professional with a background in finance, and it's rarer still to find a practitioner so willing to share their insights and experiences that they start a blog. So in Dana, we find both, and that's a real win for the procurement community, as anyone who follows Dana will surely agree. Now, in this pod, Dana talks about the importance of reflection and perspective in all procurement work, whether it's tracking savings, working with suppliers, or engaging with the community at large. So let's jump straight into the conversation, where I start by asking Dana if she found procurement or if procurement found her.
Oh, I found procurement, for sure.
So
it's interesting because I was in FP&A and financial planning and analysis. So part of what we would do was all the accruals, all of consolidating for our business partners. And so we could see and manipulate things in a sense on the back end, right, for charges, et cetera. But what we didn't get to see is have the beginning end, right? So we could see the back end, we can manipulate things there, but our influence was really limited. And because it was so limited, I said, I really want to see the end-to-end process. And that's where I decided, hey, why don't I go into sourcing? And then maybe I can be a little bit more influential on the beginning of the process versus coming to them after the fact to say, hey, you might want to try this to save money, and they've already spent it. It will be easier the other way around.
Did you find that the background in finance helped you as a sourcing professional?
Yeah, there's not many people, and I think I was the first one ever at Amgen to move from the finance function into sourcing. They typically don't have a lot of finance background people, and so, I think the first 60 days there, I had given a finance 101 to the entire organization of like 100 and some odd people. So it was definitely a mindset change because sourcing people are focused on other things. Finance is really focused on the numbers.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a stretch, and a lot of people don't understand. I think from a sourcing perspective, like when they go to finance or FP&A and they say, look, I did this great project, all these savings, and they're either cost avoidance or soft savings, you're going to get the finance person say, okay, that's great. Let me pat you on the back, but what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Because if it's not coming out of the budget, if it's not hard dollars, there's nothing really FP&A can do except validate, okay, you did a good job, right?
So would you encourage sourcing folks to be working further upstream with finance? So, for example, at the beginning, when you're doing an opportunity analysis for a project, get finance involved at that point so you can share, these are the benefits that I think that this project will bring. And have a chat about savings methodologies if it's something that can be claimed or tracked or whatever it may be, so that they're aware of what's going on, that it's not just a conversation at the end.
No, I think it's never a bad idea, especially if you think there is a possibility for hard savings to be involved. I think at any organization, always the problem is that it gets redistributed, right? So even though we may have taken a $4 million provider and now it's $2 million a year, those funds have already been reallocated to something else by the time that contract gets signed.
Yeah.
So it's a tough proposition, and you don't want to involve them too early, but you want to involve them early enough so that there's buy-in. If there is a big amount of dollars that you're trying to show your savings and that you're going to report up through your management. So
yes. So as a one of the things we often hear from a CFO or from the finance group is that, I can't find your savings. You're telling me you saved all this money. You're telling me that they're hard savings, but I still don't see them for the reason you just mentioned, that budget is reallocated. Are there things that we can do to help finance be able to capture those savings? Does it matter that they're being reallocated? I'd love your perspective of how finance thinks about that, because I think it's something we really are often challenged with in procurement is like no one necessarily trusts the numbers that we share with them with finance.
Yeah, and I think coming from finance, I would always see some of these numbers and I would kind of chuckle like, where did you guys come up with these methodologies? And I think if you don't have a finance background, it's really hard to understand what their needs are and what drives them in their thoughts. And I think a lot of times when people would come to me and show me things, I'd say, that's great, but what do you want me to do with it? I can't take it out of the budget. And, a lot of places they will, and they try to say, okay, well, if we didn't take it out of the budget, these 3 extra projects we were able to do based on these negotiations, right? So at least, even if it's not bottom line savings, there's additional project work that you can point to say without the negotiations, we wouldn't have been able to do these 3 extra, digital tactics or whatever they may be. That is useful, but again, what is FP&A when they're just planning going to do with that? Absolutely nothing. Besides, know there's a shift in where the dollars are going to be bucketed. Yeah,
I think it's important to kind of communicate things like that because it's all part of the value proposition, isn't it? And one of the things that I think that we struggle with is, it's all about obviously saving money. And so we do everything to save money, and then that drives a lot of misalignment with the business because that's not necessarily what the business wants. But it's the only way that we think that we can be credited for the work that we do. Whereas the reality, I think, is, and this is certainly what I've always tried to do in approach that I've taken in my career, was that, you're never going to get fired for delighting all of your stakeholders and providing value to your stakeholders in ways that allows them to do what they need to do. But you may get fired for hitting the ball out of the park on a savings number and everybody hates you. So focus on what the business wants as opposed to just trying to hit a savings goal at all costs.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that pressure can lead people to definitely come up with creative accounting methodologies for their savings. And I do remember some of those thinking, I just don't understand how you guys came up with this. It was the first bit of the average of this, and now it's the last bit of and you're like, let's just make this simplified. And, I've always, because I've come from finance, told people, and I myself am very conservative in the numbers that I give, because what you don't want to do is lose credibility, especially when you report up through the finance function to a CFO, and you need to provide, what value that you're giving. If you overinflate numbers, it's just not going to end up well.
No, I call it procurement math. It's this idea that we basically have a tendency to over elaborate on what the opportunity is when we're doing forecasting and when we're doing the reporting, and that if nobody can argue it, then it's just one word versus another. But it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't necessarily end well, because that's where we get a lot of the negative connotations with the ideas of savings numbers from.
Yeah, I really feel like most people in procurement who don't have some type of business or finance background would definitely benefit from having like a finance 101 or sitting with FP&A or accounting for, a week or two to understand, how they do budgets and how things get allocated, and just how the process works in general. Because once you have a sense of how the process works, you have a different lens on to then say, okay, I've done X amount of work and it's valuable. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes cost avoidance is extremely valuable. Had you not showed up, they'd be charged, $20 more an hour. At the same time, is it going to impact our bottom line? No. Yeah. And so that's making that decision and understanding how to make that decision, I think, is key. And a lot of people just don't have that insight.
I think that's a great idea. I put a lot of stock in empathizing with those that you work with, understanding what they're going through and what they're trying to achieve. And I know from my career, when I was on the practitioner side, I didn't do that. I just assumed. And, and thought that it was just a big black box. And so as long as I do my bit, then I'm good. And obviously, as I've matured my thinking, I think very differently to that today. But again, it's something that is harder to do because it's just about creating the time to do it. But your peers in all these other groups would be, I think, would welcome it with arms open.
Yeah, I think people, once they got a hold of it, could understand its value. Yeah. That said, it's just because I've been in FP&A, I always suggest, not for people to go there to stay long, but to at least get a flavor of it is insightful. It definitely, like I said, puts a different lens on things and how you then approach what your savings numbers are. Yeah. And it makes you a little bit more conservative, knowing that, hey, I could say I saved $1 million, but at the end of the day, if that's now just in 5 other projects, right, it's a different conversation.
I just have one last question on this, and I appreciate you for being game in going down this direction, because I think they're important questions. Do you recommend an organization to have set savings methodologies, or look at it in the context of each individual project? And I'm thinking, here's 5 or 6 methodologies. We're going to pick one of these methodologies and stick with it throughout the project, assuming that the project goes in the direction that we think it's going to do, rather than try to be creative.
Yeah, being creative, I don't think is ever a good idea. I'm a very type A personality with the numbers, so I would say you have to have, as an organization, agreement on what savings definitions are across the board. And I will say they can get complex, right? Whether you consider, hey, I saved, $500,000 this year and next, is that savings for both years? Or do you need to have incremental savings, right, for the next year to actually do things? It starts getting really complex and muddy, but I think if you can nail down and simplify as much as possible, then there's no question, then you don't have to worry about when you go to an executive, if they're going to think, what are these funny numbers and how they come up with this? It's a very conservative methodology anybody can buy into. Yeah. And if you get, FP&A to buy into it ahead of time too, then you're good. Trying to be creative, I think, just creates that perception of, we're trying to provide more value, or we're trying to trick somebody, or we're trying to do something we probably aren't really doing in a sense.
No, I agree with that. I always try and have like if I can get finance engaged early, have them sign off on a savings methodology at the very beginning of a project. And then at the end of the project, all it is a calculation. You're not arguing about how it works then, because, hey, we figured that we could save some more money in a different area or claim savings somewhere else. But so I'd love for you to tell me about your blog, Miss Category Management. Like, how did you end up, moonlighting as a blogger after spending the day at work as a category manager?
You know what? It's funny. So, as we had talked earlier, Steph from Tealbook actually had mentioned to me, as part of Tealbook, they have Teal boards, right? Yeah. So like LinkedIn has their blog, Facebook has its, stream, and now LinkedIn does too. And she said, would you be willing to maybe write and, publish some articles for not only suppliers, but, maybe other people who do sourcing or category management? And so, I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, okay, this is not, half bad idea. Yeah. It'll give me some time to reflect on things. And, my mind tends to work overtime. And so it was, well, how do I do this? Where do I put it? Do I publish it on LinkedIn? Do I just put it on Tealboard? Should I have a central place to do it? And so eventually it just evolved to, why don't I just have a blog, and even if nobody reads it, I'll just put the information there and, share it as needed. And I can, give Steph what she needs to start activating Tealboard and, hopefully help in my career also, right? So it just kind of went from a simple idea to help a business partner out, to help out their tool, to, why not do this? And I found through doing the blog that I love website design and creation, and writing seems to be fun, but it can be tough when you hit a writer's block. So
yes, creating content is far harder than it looks on the outside, isn't it?
It is, and I just read an article on, there's some tools that can, pre-populate things for, 100 different ideas, but honestly, if you really want good content that people are actually going to read and that is valuable, it really takes a long time. Yeah. In my mind. Otherwise, I feel like you just are throwing anything out there and just churning out crap. In a sense, it's just garbage in, garbage out, right? And that's not my focus. I'd like to hopefully provide some sort of value, if any. And share key learnings, right? That to me is really the biggest thing. I feel like there is this whole knowledge scare, or, people are very, companies don't want to share their information, right? Or people don't want to share what they're doing. And so for me, I'm a very open person, and I feel like if I can share this knowledge with you and you can benefit, it's not going to hurt anybody. And to me, most of the stuff's common knowledge, especially with category management. It's not like a supplier couldn't go out and buy the, A.T. Kearney's chessboard or look up the gemstone. I mean, it's a finite number of things we can do in category management. So I don't feel like it's a magic trick. I'm giving up.
No, I can say it is funny how, as a profession, we have been taught to keep cards close to our chest, that sharing information is giving up power. And I guess I wouldn't have started the podcast if I felt that way as well. But it's actually heartening to me to see now that I think there is less and less that people are being afraid to share. There's more sharing going on. But then that benefits us all as a profession. At the end of the day, we all want the profession to be more successful, because it's the rising tide lifts all boats. And whatever we can do to help people, to me, is, why not?
Yeah, 100%. And that's, basically what I'm here to do. I mean, I believe category management or sourcing, we're a support or helping function anyways. So it just makes sense to want to help and support others in, that same position who are maybe new or just have ran out of ideas or just, are looking for something out of left field that they can, try with their company that may not be the norm.
So have you found that by writing the blog, it's now giving you, because you're now engaging more broadly in social media through the content that you're creating, that's giving you new ideas that you can actually bring back and strengthening, you in your day job?
It does, but I think the more of the impact for me is when I'm in my day job, I think about things differently. Like I will process when I finish something differently. Like if I want to blog about it, I'll say, okay, what are my lessons learned? Did I do everything right? And then it almost makes me go back and double check my work in a sense of like, is this really the right way to do things? And if I explain it to somebody and blog about it, is it going to look all right, or am I going to sound, stupid for doing this? Should I have done something else differently? So I think it gives you that perspective just to reflect back on your work.
Yeah.
The engagements are one thing. I don't know if I take a ton back from the engagements to blog about, but I think it's great for social networking. And I mean, some of the times that you have, like I have good conversations with people, I've definitely come back and had times where I'm like, ooh, I want to blog about this or that. But, more of the times it ends up being driven from my day-to-day, kind of workload and what I'm doing and what I'm up to.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the self-awareness. That's not something that I would immediately have thought about in terms of a benefit of doing what you're doing. But I mean, self-awareness is so important and something, again, that we struggle with. So it's fascinating to hear that that's a benefit that actually it brings to you, because you kind of, in the moment, you're already thinking about perhaps how would others see how I've approached this if I talked about it.
Yeah, and it's something you typically, or at least I typically never did before. Right. I just, you do your work, you think you did a great job, and then you move on. But if you take that step back and you're like, okay, if I'm going to tell the world about this, how is it going to play out and how is it going to look? Yeah. It definitely makes you think twice about some of the things you do. So I think it's a great way to, just kind of check yourself and what you're doing and making sure it makes sense from a broader perspective.
Have you had any feedback from suppliers, or have you seen the way that suppliers interact with you, that perhaps they have read something that you've written about and positioned themselves either to align themselves with something you've talked about, or see that as a discussion starter?
Yeah, definitely. I've had people reach out to me specifically and say, I saw your blog, I thought it was interesting, would love to chat to you about that, and about, I've got this, value proposition, would you be interested in? And of course, anytime somebody comes at you with flattery, you're a little bit more, I think, open to the possibility or opportunity versus somebody spamming you and saying, hey, here's what we can do. To me, it says that they took the time, especially if they can say, hey, I read this and that was interesting. To me, that they took the time, they listened, and are truly actively wanting to talk to you. It's not just a cold call spam email, right?
It's another LinkedIn request of somebody wanting to be a follower and then immediately sending you an email that has nothing to do with anything. At least they have some like a point to talk to you about, to start a conversation from.
Yeah, and I always worry about, quite frankly, I do put some things out to suppliers, like what not to do, and I do tell them what to do, or like, in a sense, some people think I'm giving out, per se, trade secrets or negotiation tactics. I don't think that's a detriment. I feel like if you're a good supplier, you would know these things otherwise, and I do fear, though, negative feedback sometimes from suppliers, but again, I think if you've been in this job long enough, there are only a finite amount of, plays that you can take. So, it's just knowing your place in the mix and, what your strengths and weaknesses are and playing to both of those. Yeah,
and I think, a lot of the most sophisticated suppliers know anyway, all the stuff that you may be talking about. One of the unexpected things about doing the podcast was, how many salespeople I hear from who listen because, it helps them understand the psyche of a procurement professional. And,
Interesting.
And I'm not, I think about that and I think, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And, on one hand, you can say, well, is it a bad thing because they're now learning how to manipulate? But I really don't think that that's, 99 out of 100 cases, that's what happens. It actually helps people understand, like, okay, so this is what procurement's role really is. This is why I should be engaging with them. This is how they can help me and be my advocate if I support them in the things that they need. So to me, it helps build stronger relationships with suppliers rather than, giving away all the trade secrets.
100%. And I think that's what my end goal is. I know a lot of times, they just don't understand, and being in the sales function and having to sell, you don't have the same mindset. So I hope that, with us sharing and giving, some type of information of, hey, why did you fail at that RFP, or, what happened here, and giving them that feedback. It's not only, typically an RFP process, common courtesy, but just in general to build that better relationship, because as in most organizations, you want a partnership. You don't want suppliers that you're churning and burning with. Mm-hmm. So having that partnership and insight from both sides and that perspective, I think, is key to any good relationship. Transparency to me is always key.
Right.
As my one boss said, nothing to fear, nothing to hide, right? So if I have nothing to hide from my side, and neither do you, then we can be good partners, and we have trust.
Yeah, and trust is, it goes down into more supplier relationship management kind of thinking, but trust is that's the core of everything. And it's, I've worked in industries like automotive where little trust exists between suppliers. And everything is hidden, and everyone believes that everyone's trying to get one over the other, whether it's a buyer or a supplier. It's all like zero-sum games. And, in other industries where it's interesting because, like in automotive industry, suppliers are absolutely critical. Like, suppliers are obviously critical everywhere, but within an industry like automotive, even more so, because you can't build a car without, a myriad of suppliers. Within a services firm, you could build the capability to do the things that you have suppliers do. Mostly, not that you would do a good job of it, but the company could still at some level succeed. And yet, it's the automotive business and businesses like it where there's a lot of there's no trust between a lot of suppliers, and it's the service-based businesses that are all more about collaboration and innovation. Yeah,
which it really should be. I mean, category management 101 is, innovation and, working to help, your suppliers become innovative and part of your supply chain, and, what benefits them benefits you, right? Yeah. If you guys are partnering correctly together. So it's unfortunate. I've never heard about the automotive industry being that cutthroat, but it's interesting to hear that it's gone down to that level.
Yeah, and I think that there may be folks in automotive who listen and say, hey, it's not like that. And so I know I'm being very generalist, but I'm also speaking from my personal experience of, being a buyer in automotive for 5 or 6 years, especially when it gets to tough times economically. There's a lot of, it's all about saving every last penny. And you go through this cycle where you go through that process and you're trying to get rebates from suppliers and all kinds of ways to get money back from them. And then a couple of years later, when the business cycle changes, everything is wonderful and you want to partner and be great collaborators with them, and then wonder why there's no trust.
Right.
But
it's a vicious circle you can get yourself into.
So I just want to come back before we finish today and talk about raising your profile, using tools, whether it's blogging or social media, for a procurement professional to raise their profile. And I just wonder if you could share any advice for somebody who's thinking about it, maybe they're on the fence about doing it. What should they do? How should they approach it? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so, I had a colleague actually who is a consultant, and she had asked me the same question. So the advice I gave her is sometimes it's the easiest way to dip your toe in. So if you're not sure about, blogging yet, or creating your own website, or doing any things of that sort, start on LinkedIn, start, posting articles, find something interesting that you think and post it and share it and join within groups and just start commenting, get your name out there so that people are aware of who you are. Yeah. And once you feel comfortable doing that, then, if you have this great thing where you're like, I've got this great idea that I don't think anybody's ever done, let me go ahead and, write an article on LinkedIn. You can do that too, right? If you're not ready for a website. And just kind of slowly work your way into it. You don't have to automatically just dive into a blog where, it's a little bit more time consuming. Right. And like I said, you definitely have to have a lot more content to be able to come up with. But if you can just dip your toe in from the start, see how it is, and see the reactions you get from people and, if they're engaged and, that to me kind of builds your confidence to take it to the next level. Yeah. That was my perspective on how I've, in a sense, worked in there and how I've, told other colleagues, like, if you've not done anything, just kind of start by commenting or, posting something here or there. It'll get you into the mix and then make you feel more comfortable so that you do feel that you can do bigger and bolder things.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, don't be afraid of, there being crickets when you start, and nobody reading or nobody engaging, because that's actually a good opportunity for you to, like, learn your voice. And
exactly,
if you don't, like, my when I started the pod, no one listened for a long time, and that was okay. I just wanted to put myself out there and start. Yep. And, if you start turning up and showing up and being consistent and create value, then people will end up finding you. But if it doesn't happen overnight, don't think, oh, no, nobody wants to hear from me or everybody thinks I'm talking rubbish. It's just that these things just take time.
It's business, right? Yeah. A lot of our business stuff, it's not, in a sense, going to go viral. And I think a lot of the younger generations always like, oh, I want this to go viral. But I agree, you almost have to build up the base. And for a long time, and even now, I still think I write the blog for myself. I don't, when people come to me and they're like, oh, I read your blog, I think it's really good, I'm shocked. Like, I'm still, when I look at some of my numbers, I'm like, are those people really going onto my website and reading my blog? Like, this is interesting, right? But you get to gauge, I think, with some of your blogs, like, oh, this one fell flat, or this one had a ton of responses, why? So you get to go back and reflect on what worked well and what didn't, and then shape your future blogs. I've been doing it for a very short amount of time, maybe 6 months, but I know the difference on my writing styles and techniques and topics has drastically changed over that time, because you see what people really, react to and are genuinely interested in and will comment on and give you more information to want to blog more on.
Yeah, and it's funny, sometimes you just don't know when you put something out there, is this are people going to engage with it or not? It may be a topic that you're passionate about and nobody else cares about, and and vice versa.
Yeah, pretty much.
You think, oh, every man and his dog has created content about this, but you still put it out there, and sure enough, that's the one that gets the high numbers.
I think, if you have an interesting perspective, or if you have an interesting writing style, or if you're like me, you tend to be a bit of a smart ass sometimes, it kind of takes the mundane out of business, right? If you can throw in a joke or, kind of make things a little bit, give some personality to it. People are more apt to read it. I know myself personally, in reading things, I want something quick, concise, to the point, and if it's entertaining, more the better. But if it's this long 3-page read, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to zone out. So, I always try to keep that in mind too, that, you can put a lot of good content out there, but just remember, people's attention span now in the digital age is very short. So you also have to make sure to tailor things to that too.
Yeah, to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
Well, Dana, I'd love if you, before we wrap up, the very last question, and I always say to my guests, this is the easy question, is if listeners would like to, connect with you, find where you are, read the blog, where is a good place for them to find you?
Sure. They can either find me on LinkedIn at Dana Small, or they can go directly to misscategorymanagement.com, all one word, and find me there. They can submit questions, or even send me emails at misscategorymanagement at gmail.com. Okay. So I am more than open and happy to talk to anybody and give advice.
Yeah, well, what I will do is I will include links to the blog and to your LinkedIn profile on our show notes. And I would encourage anybody listening to go and check out the blog for sure, because lots of really cool insights. And it's going to be really interesting to see as well how that evolves, as you continue to get feedback as you put more content out there. So absolutely go check that out. Those will be the show notes, which will be at artofprocurement.com. That's artofprocurement.com. And just search for Dana Small and you will find the show notes for today's episode along with that link. So one last time, Dana, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Good conversation. It's nice to have.
Thank you. Hi there, it's Phil here again. I really hope that you enjoyed today's show with Dana. Now, we're going to be back next week with a deep dive into the consulting category. And actually, I think it's a show that's relevant to anybody who buys people-based professional services. I want to thank Tradov once more for their support of Art of Procurement. Now, to learn more about Tradov, including their supplier discovery and B2B blockchain payments platform, or to create your own private network for you and your team, you can sign up to become a user for free at artofprocurement.com/Tradov. That's artofprocurement.com/Tradov.